like I said, I did pray on having something good come from the accident, or I'd pray that the next day would just be a good day. Like I would have good things happen. And it was tough because probably the biggest question was why. Like, why are these things happening? Like, what did I do to deserve punishment? And that came up a lot. There was a lot of anger. I never was really outwardly angry, but I mean, I felt a lot of anger and bitterness for a long time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Empower and Elevate Podcast. I'm Mark Thomas. Some stories show us that even the toughest challenges can be overcome. Our guest's journey is just one of those stories. After a tragic accident left him with just a 1% chance of walking again, he didn't stop. With determination, faith, and strong willpower, he not only walked, but it became a symbol of hope and strength for many. In this episode, we'll explore the key moments that shaped Brock Wheeler's life, the obstacles he faced, and the lessons he learned. Now, whether you know this story or you're hearing it for the first time, get ready to be inspired by the man who beat the odds and walked beyond the 1%. Welcome, Brock.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Glad to be here.
Thanks for taking the time for us today. I greatly appreciate you joining. And, let's just jump right into this. The first thing that's on my mind with you is, I was pleasantly surprised to see you post on Facebook, and you had a book that was going to be released, and I have it today in front of me. And so I want to make sure we definitely touch on this because this is a big thing to do. And it's about your experiences and your journey. But before we get into the book and your experience and journey, I will say, following you on social media, I see you've been a very busy guy lately. And it looks like it'll be a direct outcome of the release of this book. So whether being on news, looks like some radio, invited to some events. Tell me a little bit about that. What you've been up to?
It's been a long process. I get asked a lot about how that book process went, which it really started out as journaling, and over the last decade, I've been writing those stories and editing and changing things, adding things in. And in the last 6 months, I've really, I hired a publishing company to work with to get me across the finish line, and they did a lot of design work. But that's taken up a lot of my time over these last 6 months, and it's been great to finally release it. But now the real work has started with promotion, and I'm not huge on social media. I post when I do something interesting, but I've been more active on social media recently with the promotion, and really it's been something I've wanted to have a new medium to share my story and the lessons learned with people. And I think that's been a great aspect of it, but getting feedback of what it's meant to people has made it all worthwhile. And so I've been not only working here at Paul Ready Mix and trying to keep up with that full-time work. I've, as you said, been doing a lot of the promotion through radio, TV, and also meeting people and having events. After COVID, I've really been trying to get back to speaking, and I think the book should help revitalize that. And I think it's something that's very needed in the world today, is to get out and have a positive message to share. And so that's made the extra work worth it, and filling my free time with those things.
No, I can definitely appreciate the positivity aspect in getting out there. I've mentioned in past episodes, there's so much negativity in the world. Bring a little bit of positive, doing something to make things a little better. There's just not enough of that, and I commend you. Yeah,
thank you. It's been important to me, and I think most people that have gone through a tragic circumstance and gone through challenges, that's something that's laid on their heart, is really hopefully to help people that go through those things. And I think I've realized in my travels that everyone does have a story, and everyone has gone through struggles that for them are the biggest issue they've had, or whatever that thing is. Mm-hmm. That no matter how big or small it is, I don't like when people say, well, my story is not anything compared to yours, because it really is, because it was overwhelming. It was more than they could handle. And I want to help those people get through those things. And that's been a big encouragement to me, is to hear just some of those stories, which I would say is and maybe a bigger percentage than most people find out about, but hopefully there's more people than I even know that have been positively impacted, because as I said, I think people want to do that after you've been through something like that. You want other people to avoid it. You want other people to hopefully get through it easier than you did, because you know how challenging it was.
Yeah. So, and my understanding, and I witnessed this myself, that you're no stranger to being in front of a camera and being recorded, right? You talked about being on radio and on the news. I watched a video quite a few months ago, and it was someone, I don't know how I ended up in front of me, but it was about you and your journey and your family. And it seemed like it was recorded quite a few years ago.
Yeah, back in 2010, which of course is really, that's the cover that's on the book, is when I walked out on the field at Michigan. But they did an updated version with both hands in the air. And they actually, kind of a little Easter egg, they actually replaced my face with my current face instead of the one I had back in 2010. But back when I did that, ESPN did a story on our family. The Big Ten Network had a really great short piece that kind of chronicled my workouts and what that process was like. But I was really blessed to have that interest in my story. And again, it wasn't something that was comfortable for me. I didn't necessarily like going through these workouts and having this camera on me and having a microphone attached. I had a little pack on me. Mm-hmm. I didn't necessarily want that, but I did realize again, that's a different medium, but it's, what can that do for other people? And I had no idea how well done those would be, especially the E60. They did 3 different iterations of E60 follow-ups, and especially the final one, which is about an hour long, was just an incredible thing an emotional story, obviously, but it was something I think really touched a lot of people. And then the Big Ten Network video highlighting the workouts really, I think, was a motivational piece that I think has really motivated a lot of people to push towards their dreams, because I even watch the video and think, oh my gosh, how did he do that? And I'm like, oh, that's me. I did that. And so it's really cool to document that stuff, because I realize most people don't get that opportunity to share their story with the world, or they don't get that opportunity to, share that kind of thing with so many people.
So I know firsthand that I happened to catch the Big 10, I believe it was, clips or the smaller segments. And that got me digging into finding the full hour episode or 4-hour recording, or the hour recording. And I can say that firsthand that had a huge emotional impact on me. I know that, I'll admit it, had, some tears running down my face listening and watching your story. And I've shared that with my team. And once I came, I'm like, hey, you all need to watch this, right? It's very inspiring.
Well, thank you. That is something I wanted to get across in the book, because even when I started speaking, I would have people crying, and that, it was painful. I didn't want people to feel that, but it's something I did want to, obviously they did that in the E60 piece, but I wanted to do that with the book as well, because I don't think you can quite get the same motivation and the same positivity if you don't feel those lows at the same time, and really understand how difficult that was. Because I think people that know my story, they know that we went through a lot and went through a lot of painful moments, especially obviously the accident, losing my dad, losing Hollis, who was just a senior at the time, was a terrible tragedy. And I think those, especially that E60 program, does a good job of having people feel what that was like. And as I said, looking at the journey as a whole, you see that coming out from that, I thought anything positive that could possibly happen because of that had to be a power higher than what I understand, because all I saw was the bad, the negative every day, the pain that I felt. And I was just looking for some other future that wasn't this tragic, painful moment.
Sure. I can only imagine, and I don't even know. I just look at the struggles in my own life, and and then look at what you've went through and what you've overcome. Yeah. And it is, he's talking about that perspective. We all think, well, it's nothing compared to what you did, right? What you went
Yeah.
through, what you endured, right? And how you persevered. But that's inspiration for all of us. So before we get into kind of the accident and those things and what led you to the book, can you share a bit about life before the accident? At that point, what were your dreams and some of your goals at that time?
Sure. I had some of that in my original book. I think some of it got cut out, but there's quite a bit about my life pre-accident and lessons that helped carry me through life. But before the accident, I was actually just about to graduate from Ohio State. I had worked most of my summers here in Bryan at the Ready Mix, learning this industry, basically doing every job I could do. And there were a lot of times I did not enjoy the job that I had to do. A lot of times it was the grunt work, being greasy under the trucks, even cleaning toilets, whatever needed done. And that's something too that I couldn't foresee, which is you're not always going to be able to do those jobs. I didn't know that. I thought, well, when I'm an adult, when I'm grown up, I can do all those jobs. Now I'm a kid or I'm playing sports. And so, now I kind of realize the value in that. And I think some of that's been lost because, if you don't get that work ethic early, it's hard to catch it later. Like, oh, I'll have a work ethic later. Well, it's something you have to build on. And so I spent a lot of summers here at the Ready Mix working. And as I said, I was at Ohio State, just about to finish my degree before the accident happened. And again, that was something I never knew if I'd be able to, to accomplish that. But I was very involved in sports. I was not as involved as my younger brother, who was just an incredible football player, obviously, and my older brother, who was a great basketball player. He scored 1,000 points in high school.
Oh, wow.
His junior year, he had already scored 1,000 points.
Goodness.
And in a lot of ways, I get teased by my buddies for being the runt of the family, and I'm 6'2" and a big guy, but not compared to my brother. But I looked up to both of them, and in the way that they handled themselves, and always trying to, especially with my older brother, try to keep up with his work ethic and his grades, everything. And so I was really blessed with that, with an older brother like that, and my younger brother who accomplished great things. And so that was something that really stuck with me, throughout my life. But of course, having a tragic accident happen, it really shakes you to your core and makes you wonder, what are all those things for that you work so hard for? And I think one of my actual blessings was that as I said, just about to finish school, I was in a period of my life where I could make those decisions. Now, if you're in the middle of your career, you can't just all of a sudden go and do workouts with a college football team. If you are in high school and haven't really developed to have your GED, and you haven't really made those close connections and friends, you don't necessarily want to go work out with a college football team at that point in your life either. And for me, it just so worked out. And especially having worked at the family business, I had this transitional moment where it's like, okay, what do you want to do next? And I've realized most people don't have that same opportunity, or maybe they do, but it's just a brief snapshot in time where if you just started a career, you're not like, hey, can I take a year off now after I worked for a year? You don't, have those opportunities very often in life. And I was that's where I was at that point in my life. And I could say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do, which I ended up doing 2 years of physical therapy before starting with working out with the team. But I had a lot of those things come together. And I think a lot of the things that I learned growing up that helped carry me through that difficult period.
So talking about growing up, so you mentioned your brothers in sports and being in a sense, the runt. What role did sports and those physical activities play in your life growing up?
Well, it did play a huge role in learning lessons. I mean, one I talk about in the book was trying out for the football team. And as I said, I was not the football player. I was not the football player in the family, but we also grew up in Stryker where we didn't have a football team. Right. And so when I started getting into football, I didn't realize the technical aspects. And And so I think that was a challenge for me. But I talk about in the book, I remember talking to my dad about, hey, I don't know if this is for me. Like, I love football and all that, but I'm just way behind. I don't know everything everyone else knows that grew up in it. And I remember kind of making that opening for, like, maybe I'll just kind of fade away. And I just remember my dad he wouldn't give me that opening to quit. He's like, you started a season, you're going to finish a season with the team. And I just played that 1 year, but I did finish the season. Well, I wouldn't say played. I was on the team for that season, went to practices, but that's just one of those lessons that I learned. But more so, I think that with sports, I learned a lot about just the mental challenges that we face, because you always get told, it's all mental, it's all in your head, and I think Yogi Berra said it's 90% mental and 20% physical, and but it really that was something, that it's really hard to get that across, but that's something I picked up in sports, was pushing yourself, and that the largest room in the world is the room for improvement. I mean, all those kinds of lessons that were pounded into my brain in sports, having to do these repetitions over and over.
Sure.
Having to do it over when you made a mistake. Those all came back to me. I don't think I could be in, and I don't think anyone hardly could be in the atmosphere of a college weight room and just go in there and do those things without having a little bit of that background, or at least having that mentality. It doesn't mean you have to do sports, but really, I think looking at school, even in your studies, again, that mental game, where in this case, I had no experience in figuring out how to learn to walk again. And even if you're in studies, like learning your hardest subject, the thing you have the most difficulty with, I think that was a big piece, because I was terrible at whatever we were trying to do. Like I said, no experience. There was no playbook that told you, okay, do this. And we had physical therapy, of course, but it was just something I wasn't good at. So I had to figure out, how am I going to get good at something that's not natural to me? It's not a natural skill. And so that played a big role too, even if it comes to, your worst class in school. Like, how do I approach it? What motivates me to go through something that's frustrating and keep having to go back again and again and fail effectively, because that's a lot of what we did, even in physical therapy, was, hey, try this, and fail. The first time I worked out with Mike, I sat on a big balance ball, and I thought, okay, I'm doing okay. During my injury, I lost even my abdominal muscles, so I couldn't sit up without a chair back for a long time. But I sat on that ball and said, okay, I'm doing all right. And just, I don't know, maybe like 10 seconds after sitting down, I just started to roll and just slowly go onto the ground. And I just thought, oh man, I couldn't even do that. Wow. And Mike wasn't even discouraged in the slightest. Like, no problem, we can work with that. We can figure that out. And just moved on to the next thing. And so, I learned that, like anyone most people, I think, in school, they figure out, okay, how am I going to get through this class that I am just terrible at? Like, I'm not good at this subject. And you have to figure out, and a lot of times it comes down to having a friend that is good at it. Like, okay, how do you do this? And I had to lean on Mike for a lot of that. But those are just some of the lessons that I even talk about in the book, that, they were just central to my success in the future.
So let's go back in time. Obviously, I've watched the video and I know a little bit. The book here in my hand was delayed for some reason. I pre-ordered it, but it didn't arrive until...
it's demand. They've gotten so many. I don't think they expected that many books to sell. So I'm really blessed with everyone.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I just received this. I was out of state and I got back to the office Monday and it was sitting here waiting on me. So I haven't had much time with it. But I am definitely looking forward to that. But for those that don't know your story, let's go back to 2007.
Yeah.
Take us back to the day of the accident and explain, how did that change your life in an instant?
I actually remember, I remember the first time I was really sitting down and saying, hey, I've had a bunch of people over the years ask me if I had a book, and I said no, and they're like, you should. And I probably, like I said, over 10 years ago, I still remember sitting down and kind of going back, which is a challenge to go back in time and relive those moments. But I remember vividly Christmas Eve of '07, standing in my driveway, and there wasn't snow on the ground, but it was snowing. And I went out to go on a run, and there was a huge pull to just go back inside where it's warm, and it's slippery, it's cold. I didn't dress warm enough. All these excuses of all the reasons and everyone I think that's human condition. Your body explains to you why you shouldn't really, go out and make yourself work so hard. And I just remember staring out in the driveway and just and I had no reason to run. I wasn't training for anything. But I just wanted to, like I felt compelled to, and I went on just a maybe 1 or 2 mile run. I don't even know how far I ran, but I just went out for this jog and came back. And I remember my dad was cooking lunch and just was like, what'd you run for? It's cold. It's starting to snow. It's slippery and getting icy probably. And I just felt like I had to go run. And at that time, I was also lucky. That's the thing. I wasn't training for anything that I knew of, but I do feel like looking back at that this terrible thing was happening, and I was in the best shape of my life. I really was. And the nurses, the doctors said, that really helped me get through all the trauma. But in any case, we had a pretty normal Christmas Eve, just being at the house, and we were planning to go in the mid-afternoon over to my second cousin's house and spend Christmas Eve with them, which is a typical Christmas Eve. But it all we drove back. We left the party, and we were driving back to go to church. I believe 9 or 10 o'clock. We were going to go to this midnight mass, so called, and that was my aunt's church, and watch my uncle and aunt sing in the choir. But on our way there, 90-year-old man ran a stop sign and hit our car. And I still remember that moment vividly, but then just black, just nothing. And I remember when I came to, and I don't even know how long that was, but when I came to, I had, shortly thereafter, I could hear people talking outside, but I remember I was laying on the passenger window on the passenger side. And I remember someone coming up to the driver's window and looking down at me and basically just telling me to remain calm and all those sorts of things. But he warned me that when I came out, I'd feel the most pain I've ever felt in my life. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I mean, I was in shock. I couldn't feel my legs in that moment, but I didn't really think about it. I couldn't move I didn't think anything of it. I think I might have even told him that. And so he probably knew what that meant, but I didn't know what that meant. I just thought, like, I still didn't know what was going on. And, but he was right. I mean, when they pulled me out, it was the most pain I've ever felt in my life, and since or before. And I was taken to the hospital. It was a blur. I remember counting down. I'd never had a surgery, but I remember counting down from 10 and going under at about 8. And then by the time in my mind I would have gotten down to 0, I woke up again. 8.5 hours had passed. And,
Wow.
And they had worked on my back that entire time, replacing 2 vertebrae. And it was some short time thereafter that the doctor came in to tell me that I had to have a surgery on my back and all those things, and then laid it on me that I'd never walk again. That even a 1% chance would be more credit than she would want to give me, but that's what it is. And and that's at some point during that time, I know in between the accident and the surgery, I had a trooper come to tell me that my father had passed, but I didn't really. I felt it, but I didn't believe it necessarily. I mean, all of it felt like it was a nightmare. Like none of it was real. And I was waiting to wake up. And I didn't get much sleep, obviously, at the hospital. But when I did and I woke up, every single time was like a new realization that, like, I'm waking up again and I'm in a hospital bed. What happened? And I basically had to like relive it all over and over again, because every time I woke up, I was somewhat in shock that, like, this is my life now. This isn't going away. But that changed everything for us as a family and for me, obviously. But I went through, as I said, it was about 3.5 months in the hospital. And when I finally did get home, I think there was a lot of soul searching. And when I got back to my house, I couldn't go to my room because I was still in my wheelchair. At that point, I think I had enough medication that my legs finally, I didn't feel anything for a while, but when I did, I would have just painful sensations, painful burning. And the medication got to where I couldn't feel anything. So, but when I got home, I realized that, this was all real. Like, this is my house, and it's empty. No one's here. And I know there was a big part of me that was waiting to come home, and maybe that would be this inception point where finally I'd wake up in my room and it was all a nightmare. But that didn't happen. So there was a lot of figuring things out, especially the first year of trying to realize and comprehend everything that had happened and what that meant for my future.
Yeah. So when the comment was made about 1% chance or less than a 1% chance, really a 1% chance of walking again, do you recall what your initial thoughts and emotions were to that comment?
I mean, I think it was the same as the other things that they told me had happened, but I just remember saying no, like, no, that's not, like, you're wrong, basically. And really not necessarily that you're wrong, I won't walk again, but you're just, like, you're confusing me with someone else. Like, you didn't do that surgery. That didn't happen.
This isn't real. Like, yeah.
Basically going through those stages of grief that I just denied everything that wasn't real. I mean, even in that first day, as I was processing things, though, it was like, okay. I mean, I couldn't hardly move, like even turn or anything in bed. And I'm like, okay, so I did have this surgery. Like, that's a real thing. And I would still tell myself, though, that she's still, like, I will, I'll get through this. And it wasn't quite that easy, but it was, I'm going to get through this. I'm not going to be like everyone else. Like, I'm going to overcome this. And she doesn't know me. She doesn't know how I am. But usually by nighttime, I'd set back in, like, that. And not that they were, all negative, but they knew the reality I was facing and what a challenge it would be. And so by nighttime, usually things would settle in that, like, this is your life now. Like, it's going to be awful all the time, and you're going to be in physical pain, and you're going to be in emotional pain, and this is just what life is now. And usually around those times is when I would say my prayers, and just, if anything could go right, if anything positive could ever come from this, then it would kind of renew the faith I had, because just everything was terrible. And so I would start my mornings again. Okay, I'm going to overcome this. And I really had hoped for that miraculous moment that, boom, I just wake up and none of it had happened. But I also hoped that I'd wake up and just forget what had happened, and I would just get out of bed and just walk home. And of course that didn't happen either. So it was a constant tug back and forth as far as getting to nighttime and like I said, usually not sleeping a wink, and just thinking, this is my life now, this is what it's going to be. And then the next morning having to reset and eventually get to the mode at the University of Michigan that I'm going to go do my physical therapy, do what they tell me to do, give it my best, and, just make it through another day and really take it day by day. That was, I think when I really started to regain, which I think I naturally had a positive, optimistic attitude, like just my personality, but I kind of regained that again. Instead of just saying no and you got the wrong guy and that kind of thing, I just said, well, I'm going to do the things they tell me to do and get the most out of every day that I can. And hopefully
Sure.
that adds up to something of value.
So daily you were dealing with the mental and emotional, right, aspects of this and the struggle, and hoping maybe you just wake up and it's back. Everything's back to normal, right? They're just kind of living this dream and this nightmare.
Yeah.
That's a lot that you were trying to cope with, and then your family was coping with due to the tragedy and obviously you being in the hospital and having these surgeries. How was that support from them for you and, being there? And I'm sorry, everyone's dealing with their own thing, right?
Yeah.
You said the loss of your father, the loss of your loved ones. And then, so help me a little understand about the support aspect there.
It was huge. I think that for each of us, I think we each just were strong in our own way as far as bearing, that weight that we had. I mean, even for me, I would never make it out as bad as it actually was. Even a nurse asking me what's my pain on the pain scale, I might say a 4 or 5, but in my mind, it's really a 7 or 8 if my mom was sitting with. And I think the same way for my mom. She's trying to be strong for all of us. And again, I go back to that, comparing to things, but, her dealing with her loss, probably in a lot of ways is a stronger burden to bear than, even for any of us. I mean, again, losing your father is not by any means, an easy thing. I mean, it's, again, a huge, terrible thing, but for my mom, that's someone she's, been with as long as I've been alive, and someone that's been with her. And then as well for my brother, and what he was dealing with the loss. And then of course for me, I'm dealing with learning how to live life in a wheelchair and the loss of my legs. And they're all different forms of loss, but certainly the biggest challenge, as hard as it was going through physical therapy and those things, dealing with that loss was by far, the most challenging for any of us. And so I did have the support. I was fortunate enough for my brother. He graduated high school early after all this happened and went to Michigan to start a new season of life. And so I did get to see him more often at the hospital to spend time with him. My older brother was at the hospital nearly every day. And meanwhile, he was driving back and running the family business that even with this accident happening, had to continue on. So he was working double shift effectively, working through normal business hours and then coming to Toledo to be at the hospital in the evenings with me. And so that kept me going. I mean, I think in a lot of ways kept me from breaking down, because I really, I saw a lot of people at the hospital that did not have that support system. And I saw some people even that had support, and by the time they left the hospital, that support was no longer there. They didn't want anything to do with the challenges they were about to face, and that was heartbreaking to see as well. But it also reminded me of how fortunate I was to have that. And in addition to that, the whole community of Northwest Ohio and even beyond in Michigan and in Ohio, I had just little things. I had 2 referees that from when I played basketball in high school that visited, and they read my care page about how I love Frosted Flakes. I had an obsession with Frosted Flakes, and they brought me this Kellogg's gift thing of little trinkets, that in and of themselves weren't that valuable, but meant a lot to me to get that. And a lot of classmates that, or even friends that were now teachers that, I had a big banner in my hospital room up on the wall with all the students giving me encouragement. But I mean, it really does mean a lot, because most of the time it was, whether it was at lunch when I'm in my room or throughout the night when I'm just laying there, that's what I'm looking at. I'm either looking at a blank wall or a big banner of some kids, and some that try to draw a smiley face or a horse, picture, and just get like a little bit of encouragement from that. From somewhere, there's some kid that, took the time to say, I want this guy to feel better, even though he didn't know who I was, but he read about me, or maybe knew me, or maybe his parents knew me. But that would kind of give me that smile. And I look back on those days and wonder like how I got through that. And deep down, I know how I got through that, but I have people say that I don't think I could have gotten through that. And I said, I know the feeling, because I don't think I could have either, other than all those different things that came together, including that support and the prayers. I mean, people really, again, in hindsight, I look back and I see all those moments. And as I was journaling about my book, then I see those pieces come together and really see how I did get through that.
Yeah, to have that support and encouragement, not only that from your family, your loved ones, your friends, but then complete strangers, right? I mean, that's amazing.
Well, and I had a friend, Katie, that came up from Ohio State and brought me a gift from the president, Gord Gee at the time, and he had sent me a present, and it was an Ohio State University shirt. And I said, does he want me to get better or not? He knows I'm in Ann Arbor, and I got to see him when I did graduate, and it was funny because he knew, he knew my brother went to Michigan, and I had this picture of him like holding up this fist, like, hey, you got to cheer for Ohio State, and he was a great guy, but one of many. That's what was so cool is I had almost competing. With Ohio State and Michigan of getting support. And I remember being in the basement where physical therapy was and getting a phone call. And it was always exciting, like, oh, someone wants to call me. And I remember answering the phone and having someone tell me that, hi, this is Coach Tressel. Is this Brock Mueller? And I kind of chuckled because I was like, okay, who is this? Like,
who's messing with me?
Yeah, with one of my buddies. And I had a few names pop up, as I listened to him, I'm like, this is that's really good impression. But I mean, it was such a cool thing. Obviously, Elliot's coach, Rich Rodriguez, came to the hospital and visited me, but I don't think there's very many people, and except for a high school recruit that gets that call, from those two coaches in the same week, and it did. It was a real blessing, and it's one of those things that I could really highlight at the end of my day and say, oh, of course I had this go wrong and I had that go wrong. I mean, there were more days than I can count that I had to start my day puking into a trash can, but those are the moments I could stand out and say, wow, here's the things I'm grateful for. I think that's something none of us do enough, but just listing, 5 things here. End of the day, I was grateful for this, or I got this phone call from this person, or here's something that went right. And just listing those things, I think, makes a huge difference in our attitudes.
Yes, it does. And you just brought up, actually, I believe it's today's episode that was just released as we record this, that we talk about gratitude journals and mentioning, just right, even if it's just something you're grateful for, listing those, 3 things, whether it was just because it was a sunny day, right? Something, ending your day with gratitude. What was the turning point? You talked about the struggles and the realization that this is real. This isn't a dream I'm going to wake up from, or a nightmare I'm going to wake up from. What was the turning point that made you decide to beat the odds and pursue walking again?
Well, it is hard to point out a particular moment. I talked about Mike Barwis coming to visit me. Coach Rodriguez came to visit me and invited me to come visit the team anytime. I'd always be welcome, and that he believed that one day I could lead the team out on the field and walk us out on the field. And that seemed at that point a really crazy, wild dream, which was cool, but not realistic maybe. I mean, but it planted a seed. Those moments plant seeds. And I think for me, what stands out in my mind is one of the times I went to visit my brother. I'd go visit him for practice. I'd go just be there at the facility to see how he was doing and see what they went through. But Mike would always come out from wherever he was and say, "Hey, when do you want to work out with the team?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm doing a lot of physical therapy, and that's basically wearing me out completely." And I just wanted to keep doing that, and I wanted to reconnect with friends and kind of get back to living after the 4 or 5, 6 months of just hell that I had been through. And so what happened was it was about a year and a half after the accident, about I think October maybe of 2008. I take that back. That would have been October of 2009. So about a year and a half after the accident. But anyways, I remember going to he's like, "Come into my office," and we went and sat down. We were just chatting. And I finally asked him, like, well, me working out with you, what does that even look like? How does that even work? And he really simply just said, "Well, I'll give you a schedule. You'll be here, and I'll have either me or one of my guys just put you through workouts, and we'll just see what works and how far we can go." And I think the real turning point for me, and again, I'm trying to rationalize it in my head, like there's all the reasons again, just like when I went for a run on Christmas Eve, there's all these reasons not to. So What is the one reason I needed to actually do it? And he finally, I said, what's it going to take for me to just go forward with this? And he said, I needed just to commit fully. I need to commit fully, and I can't quit. He said, "You'll want to quit." And I said, I won't. I don't think I'll want to quit. And he goes, "Yeah, you'll want to quit." He's like, "But you can't quit." And basically we had to do a handshake commitment, which I did agree to. And I think that was really the turning point, that I'm going to do this. And Mike said to me that, again, it wasn't going to be anything special about him or me, but we were going to put in the work, and we'd leave that up to a higher power to say that what's going to happen will happen. Like we're committed to it. And that's what we were going to do. And so we basically set up that next Monday. I was going to come in at 9 a.m. and I didn't even know, I didn't have it in my calendar. I mean, I just knew I was coming in at 9 a.m. What I didn't know is I wasn't going to leave till 4 or 5. Like I was going to be there all day. Yeah. And it wasn't all workouts. I wasn't just crawling back and forth for 8 hours. I mean, I had times where I was sitting on these power plates that would just activate your nerves and shake your body and hopefully break up lactic acid. I mean, I would go to the nutrition bar and have, I'd be drinking Gatorades as much as I could, but, protein shakes, I mean, that kind of thing. I would have those and then I'd go back to work. And usually I'd still have like a lunch break, but I never was hungry. I didn't have any appetite. They'd have to force me to eat. I'm too tired to eat. But I did want to quit a bunch of times, but I did have, week to week and month to month, I would have significant progress that I hadn't seen for the last 15 or 20 months. Like I hadn't seen muscles twitching around my knee or feeling, something in my butt, like, oh, there's like, I'm sore or something, like something feels, it's different. It's not the same kind of pain that I had felt. And at that same time, he had to get me weaned off of my pain medication because he said those things are meant to stifle your nerves and get them to not send so many signals. And you can't have that. Like we need to get off of that. So that was a challenge because usually at night, it's kind of the restless leg syndrome. I'd have a lot of nerve pain, but we had to work through that. But but that was really the turning point, is when I sat down and I had someone that which I had my family, but I mean, this person was fully committed that he's going to get me walking again if it was the last thing he did. And that was enough for me to want to pursue that fully and see where we could take it, which, like I said, I was in this period where I had the opportunity, well, of a lifetime, not only because I wasn't a football player and I got to work out with the football team, but also because I had graduated from Ohio State. And it's like, okay, what are you going to do now that you've graduated? Mm-hmm. And I was in that period where I hadn't really fully started my career and I wasn't in college. And this came up as an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Well, and for Mike to see you and believe that he could make a difference, right? Like that in itself is just wow, right? Like going, hey, like going, and I'm and to help you. So I'm curious too, like you said, you've been going through tons of therapy and doing these things. Was there any type of influence or I guess from their doctors or things like that? Were they advising you against doing something like this, or were they all for it?
I mean, they really left it up to me. My doctors at U of M, Dr. Kyoto and Rodriguez, they're very forward looking. That they I think believed there was more they didn't know than what they actually knew, which they knew a lot, and they had been in that field for a long time. But I remember Dr. Rodriguez said that 90% of what happens from here forward will be up to you. And the 10% that we're doing is hopefully keeping you healthy and keeping you able to go out and do what you want to do with your life. But that stuck with me, that which I think goes for just about anything in life. 90% of it's going to be up to what you do with it. And of course, I talk a lot about that because given my circumstances with someone running a stop sign, well, I didn't have anything to do with that. Like, it was 90% what he did. Well, if I focus on that aspect, I knew I'm not going to get anywhere. Moving forward, 90% of physical therapy is going to be what I put into it. 90% of how I spend my free time is going to be what my future holds. And I think that's what was encouraging to me with, like I said, especially Dr. Rodriguez, is that, that part's up to you. What do you want to do with it? And I do think that's the thing. I realized they couldn't stand there and tell me that, hey, I'll get you walking again, do this, that, and the other. With the legal ramifications, liability, I don't know. Yeah. But I knew they couldn't put that out there and give someone that. But Mike could. He had the freedom to do that. And I think that's a big part of why he didn't go into healthcare. He went into athletics because he didn't want to be bound by these rules, which in our case, he had told me that, he asked me about physical therapy. He always checked in, how's physical therapy? What progress have you made? And I usually gave him the optimistic, well, I'm twitching these muscles. I did get to the point where I could just barely kick my leg, and I described it as when they test your reflexes in your knee and tap with the hand. But I was giving every effort in the world in getting my leg to kind of twitch and kick at that point when I started with Mike. But I told Mike physical therapy was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I mean, it took everything in me. I would go for 2 hours, and then the rest of the day I would either be asleep or playing Wii tennis from bed. I mean,
it just wiped you out.
Yeah, and I'd have friends that like, hey, we want to take you to the restaurant. We'll do whatever we need to do. We'll go out and go to a restaurant or whatever. And I'm like, I can't. And now my off day, I might be able. The off day, I would try to, anyways, depending. But it took everything in me. And Mike would always tell me that, well, you have to work harder then. And I'm like, you have to work harder than the hardest I've ever worked. And I've told people that it really is not a situation where I've met a lot of people, obviously, in the same or similar condition, because spinal cord injuries are so unique to the person, but and the injury and how it happened and a million different things. But I've always told people I was very lucky, because it's not a situation where, well, you just have to work harder, because it's not that. It's not, you're not working hard enough, and that's why your legs don't move. Because the reality is that I did realize that for a long time my legs would not move. But what it has made me question is how many people give up on that dream because of the 1%, because of one thing that I've realized almost everyone's told is after 2 years, there's no progress. Like that's when we officially know wherever you are, that's what you're going to get. But that wasn't my case. I made more of my progress after the 2-year mark than before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I've also told people I don't recommend in anything that you devote your entirety of your life towards it. And I talk about that as well, but I had a physical therapist that said that this would break me. I'd, be, 50 years old looking back saying, oh, why didn't I live my life? All I did is try to walk again and I wasted it. And in my mind, I knew I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't waste my life trying to walk again. That's not how it would work. I didn't know how it would work exactly, but I knew it wouldn't be that. And that's what I told people too. It's not a situation that if someone's in a wheelchair that they haven't worked hard enough. That's not the case at all. This is, I realize, my unique story, and again, a very, very rare thing. But what I have seen from people that are disabled is they've gone out and they've done what they've wanted to do in life. And a lot of times it's not walking, it's going back to work and fixing up big trucks, or I have a friend that does motocross, and that's what he does. He's found a way to go do that, and it didn't involve walking. It didn't involve any of those things. And for a lot of people, it is. They get back and do the work they want to do. And for a lot of people, I realize, even in my line of work in construction, it's a very challenging. When I was in my wheelchair, very challenging to go out in the field. Now I can come in the office. That's not that big of a problem or challenge, but sometimes it is. Just to get to the office can be a challenge in that condition. But I have found that they're very determined people to do what they want to do, and I've encouraged them to do what their story is. That doesn't mean do everything you can to walk, but for me, it was getting the potential. I didn't want to look back and say, oh, I should have tried harder. I had this opportunity to work out with the football team. I didn't want to go back and say, man, I wonder what happened if I did work with him. And I didn't have to have that regret. And so that's what I've encouraged with people. Again, whether it's with being injured or any other goal in life, is, really realize what is your, you don't want to be pounding your head against a wall your whole life. But you also don't want to give up on a dream just because it gets hard, because that's what the one thing you do know is it will be a challenge, and it will get tough, and you'll get discouraged. And so hopefully you can overcome that. But I was blessed with people to help me through that.
Yes, you were severely, most definitely blessed. And you talked about the, being exhausted. Your friends want to take you out. You're like going, dude, I just can't, right? Like, you were physically exhausted, but I'm assuming too that you're probably mentally and emotionally exhausted from that. And as a young man coping with all this, I'm curious, what role was faith and spirituality? What impact or what role did that have in your recovery?
It played a major role. I mean, like I said, I did pray on having something good come from the accident, or I'd pray that the next day would just be a good day. Like I would have good things happen. And it was tough, because probably the biggest question was why. Like, why are these things happening? Like, what did I do to deserve punishment? And that came up a lot. There was a lot of anger. I never was really outwardly angry, but I mean, I felt a lot of anger and bitterness for a long time. And that was frustrating to me, because I thought I was relatively good. I thought I was, living a good life, not hurting people, not doing, bad things. I thought I was doing what I'm supposed to do. And then I had these, terrible things happen. And so that was a big question that hung with me for a long time. And I often describe it as the footprints in the sand poem, because in the middle of that hospital, it really was like, where's God? Like, where is this higher power? Like, because I don't see him and I don't feel him. Like, and again, there were small moments with the encouragement and the people that came into my life that helped me along, but it wasn't apparent. But looking back, I look back and, you see the one set of footprints in the sand. It's when you're being carried. And in those moments, again, when I was journaling, writing this book, I realized all those times, like, how did I not see, this happen? Or even getting through the night and being able to go to physical therapy without sleep. How did that happen? And as I said earlier, it's like, I don't know how I got through that, but really deep down, I do know how I got through that. And it was even more apparent to me when I started working out with Mike, because I realized that this was something that he didn't have time to do or deal with, but he had to. He had, purpose. And I realized it's not just because he has that big a heart. I mean, it was a calling for him. And he made that very apparent to me, that even when we started our day, like, just to remind you, this isn't about me or you. It's like, we're gonna put in the work and let God do the miracle. Let him do that work, because I wanted to wake up and have just, I'm walking, that's boom, miracle. But I look back and see the process of it. I see so many stories, and actually the publisher, my actual story builder, as she liked to be called, she put together a lot of those dominoes that fell, and just said, you look at that and say, look at this coincidence, look at this coincidence. But she puts them all together, and it's like, now come on, nobody's sitting here and genuinely going to say this is a coincidence. And certainly no one's going to look at that and say, wow, Brock, you are a master strategist. You put together all these things, and had Coach Rodriguez, who was at the top of his game coaching, lose to an underdog Pitt. They would have been national champs and gone. I mean, they would have gone to the national championship, and they lost this one game. Then they end up going to Michigan to coach. And you meet Mark Barwis. My brother getting recruited by Michigan before any of this happened, and getting and actually saying, you know what, I actually like Michigan for the first time in my life, and going to Michigan. But all those pieces, and those aren't even, I mean, those are big pieces, but they're not the biggest pieces that fell into place. And but all those things happening together, that reinforced my faith. As I said, it was very shaken. I mean, my whole value system was shaken by all of this. But with working with Mike and saying, you know what, those lessons I learned that my grandpa Tom taught me at the Ready Mix, that my dad taught me in sports, or my mom taught me at home, like, they do matter. And even though you do have those moments where you think, do they really? In the long run, they absolutely do.
Yeah, it's hard to deny that there wasn't an influence there.
Yeah, and I'm more and more encouraged by that, actually, just because, again, looking back, I realize how little I had to do with it. I mean, I did a heck of a lot of work for sure, but again, it doesn't necessarily mean, you'll overcome a spinal cord injury just because of that. I realized that, and my surgeon described it that way. She thought my spinal cord being severed can never heal, and that's that. But she thought if I didn't have a complete injury, thank God. But she said if I had anything from what she saw, like, I had to have just had a thread hanging. Like, that's the only reason I wasn't incomplete, is that I had just a thread, which in the grand scheme of things won't really matter to my progress, but it did. It meant, again, if 1% of my spinal cord wasn't injured, it was that. And again, not that it's enough for me, because it's not enough for me, but it was enough for God. I believe that.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it's hard to argue that. I mean, there's just no way. So the book, once again, right here in my hand, Beyond 1%. Walk me through a little bit of that. We touched on it in the beginning, but in the process of journaling and the storytelling piece, was there any particular chapter or moment in putting this together that was extremely difficult for you emotionally as writing this?
There were a lot of parts. I mean, initially, I think of the sad parts that were difficult, but there were also some really happy moments that actually brought me to tears, just realizing, wow, like I was blessed enough to have this moment. And I do feel blessed because I think I have more days than most where I'm not a crier really, but I have these really joyful moments that bring me to tears. I don't think we get enough of those. So any of those we get is really incredible. And I feel like I'm spoiled with that, but a lot of them were happy moments that made me tear up, and they weren't difficult in the sense that they were painful, but difficult, hard to put into words, hard to even write the words out because it was such a powerful moment. And those are the ones I love to share, which a lot of those come towards the end of the book. But certainly the hardest part was writing about the accident and the time in the hospital, which my sister-in-law, Molly, did a lot of the care page writing. So a lot of it I was able to pull from that, which was helpful for timelines and everything. But when I would read what I did that day, I would also get the parts that maybe weren't included in the care pages of the difficulties I had, or even relive those nights thinking about the day I had when Coach Tressel called. But when the night came, looking at all the pieces of my life that had, shattered effectively, that was really hard and painful, which a lot of those I write about. And I think the ghostwriter I worked with, I think, did a good job of putting those onto paper better than I did, more smoothly than I did, because a lot of it was, to me, journaling and just getting those emotions on the page. But I think she did a really nice job of interpreting what I was feeling and putting it down. But those parts were the time in the hospital. That was difficult to write about, and in particular, having to go back and realize I wasn't able to go to my dad's funeral because I was in the hospital. And our local channel, IMTV, actually did a private broadcast, so I could at least,
oh my goodness, really,
be a part of that. But writing that and re-feeling those emotions, that might have been the most difficult as far as putting to paper and thinking about. But again, I look at that and I think, what a disservice to do to, the people that made that happen, to not share that, and share on the good side. Like, what I don't know what goes into putting that together, but I know it's not some easy thing. And it certainly isn't like today where you can just be on a call like this and have the internet work out. I mean, that was a fairly complex process, I think, to make that happen.
You're talking 17 years ago or something, correct? I mean, that's...
Yeah. And so to have people that were willing to step up and do that, just to give me that moment, because I wouldn't want to look back and say, oh, I didn't even know it happened, because that's what it would have been, especially, with some of the medications I was on. I could have just been that I never even knew it happened. So at least I was able to be, present in the moment. And again, not at all an easy situation to be in and to go through, but I wouldn't have wanted to change that and just pretend it never happened, because what a disservice that would be too. So that was probably the most difficult.
Now, on the flip side of that, how has writing the book helped you on your journey of healing and reflection?
It's helped immensely. I mean, as I said, you're dealing with those things that sometimes it is easier to bury those feelings and bury that stuff.
Certainly.
And I don't blame anyone that does, because I did it for a long time. But in writing it out, and again, we cut down the book really to make it an easy read, so to speak. But as far as bringing the pages down, I had really poured out my heart and soul into this, and I think that's what they've captured. But there was also a lot of times as I went into the writing of the book that. I don't know, I realized how much everyone helped in getting me there. I don't know.
No, it's great. So we talked before we started recording for just a few minutes in the green room, and I discussed, the mission of this podcast is one of hope, and to help one person every day through the podcast. And
Sure.
what was your hope for readers of Beyond 1%? What is your hope that they will take away from this?
Well, we did. What I loved is a suggestion. I do that a lot in my speeches, is hopefully give people a chance to reflect on their own life and have that basically inward looking view of how this can help them. And so what we did is at the end of every chapter, it asked questions of the reader about who their mentors are, or who's their Mike Barwis coach, or on the flip side of that, how can you use your talents to help somebody else, just like Mike did with me. Now, Mike credits me with helping him find his purpose, but I certainly credit him with helping me find my life's purpose too. And that's what I hope people get from the book. Motivation, encouragement, inspiration, all those things are great. But what I really hope for the long run is that it encourages them to write in their journal, and not that you have to write a book, but that just like you spoke about, or as you did in the last podcast, is to say, how do you do that gratitude journal? That maybe it's just a Post-it note that you write some of those things you're grateful for, but I think the journaling aspect, and as you just asked me, with it being therapeutic, was very therapeutic to just get that on paper, and again realize it wasn't a nightmare to wake up from, but it was something that I can process and feel and go through those emotions and not feel like I have to hide from it or be scared of it. Although, again, I understand people that do, because even for me, it's not something enjoyable. But when I look back, I talk about that as well. I have a lot more tears of joy and happiness that I remember over the sadness and the pain that I felt. And I think that is just a process of growing and becoming stronger. Not that it gets easier, but you become stronger. And again, you honor the memory by knowing how much joy and how much help that people brought into our lives. And I hope that's what people get from the book, is that they do actually, not that you do have to write it down, but at least rather than try to speed through the book and be a speed reader, is to kind of take pause at the end of each chapter and at least reread those questions and really think about, are the goals that I set ambitious enough for me? Because I don't want people to read the book and think that I had all this ambition towards walking. I mean, for me, it was kind of a selfish endeavor that I wanted to walk again, and it became something way more important and way more valuable and rewarding to me than just walking. I hope that people realize that from the book as well, that this wasn't some straight line progress that led me to success at the peak of some mountain. I mean, it was a roller coaster, and I didn't have what it took to get there. I didn't have the game plan that would get me there. I didn't have a lot of the things I needed to get there. And again, I tried to talk myself out of it. Well, I'm not part of the team. I'm not a football player.
Just like you try to talk yourself out of it, in the sense that the run that morning, right? Like all the things.
Yeah. And that's not even something I think I even connect. I find like doing these podcasts or even working with my publishers, it's like all of a sudden we bring these connections together. But you're absolutely right. I think we so often say no to, instead of asking someone something, we just say no for them and make it too easy on them. But, maybe just to ask the question that maybe that person is actually wanting to be a mentor to somebody. And then you're there like, oh, I don't want to ask them for help because I can't figure something out. But I've found that you make a lot of friends by actually asking them for a favor, because they feel, needed. And so those are just some of the things I hope people really do take that time. Again, not that they have to write, but they take a moment and really read those questions and think about them and gain that from it. Maybe you do have to set more ambitious goals, or maybe you are pounding your head against a wall. Well, how do you do that? Well, maybe I need to find that Mike Barwis that can kind of give me a little bit of a pathway towards where I need to go. Or maybe I do need that Mike Barwis that's tough love situation, which no one really, well, if they really, really want the dream, then maybe they actually do want that tough love to say, you know what, I do need someone that's going to hold me accountable. I certainly did, because I didn't wake up every morning and say, yeah, I get to go to the gym. And And that's something else that stood out to me in my travels is people would say, man, I would love to work out with a team. I mean, whether it's Ohio State or whoever, man, I'd love to work out with them. And I'm just like, no, you would not, believe me. you would like, you wouldn't enjoy it. Now you might be able to say, you'd love to say that, hey, I got to work out with a team once, but you would not love doing it.
As you're throwing up in a bucket, you'd be rethinking that real quick.
Yeah. And I had a lot, there were a few reporters that wanted to interview Mike, and he'd say, if you do and he probably would have done the interview anyways, but he would say, just for fun, to make it interesting, that if you come do the warm up with the pros, I will do the interview. And they would just do the warm up and they'd be puking in the bucket. And they weren't out of shape guys or anything, but he had a writer that actually did go through the whole workout, like to get, a time to chat with him. And luckily I didn't make you do that, Mark, but it was really cool to see people that were, again, even people that just observed the work we were doing. And probably for a lot of them thought, this doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure people can relate. Someone sees what you're doing, and maybe it's not even your job, it's a hobby or something. And they're like, I don't get that. And that's fine. I'm like, I don't need them to get it. We understood what we were doing and what that process was. And the truth is, it's kind of cool because they did get to see me walk on the field. And so if they did see us in the gym, I always thought there's probably a janitor somewhere or one of the intern trainers that are watching us do this and thinking, what the heck?
Right.
Well, they did get, a lot of people got to see the walkout on the field and thought, oh, that's what they were doing. I didn't understand. And I think to myself, I don't even understand it, but we're doing it. I just trust in the process and took it one step at a time. And so it is cool to see that. And I hope people get that. Like, and I think for a lot of us, we're in the midst of the stress and every day-to-day rat race, and we don't stop and think. I just spoke to another group that's in the automotive industry from Dana, and they, I said, I am blessed by speaking at an event and then talking to someone and say, that's inspiring to me. It's going to encourage me. And you get to see that end result. And I don't think for a lot of people, you do this hard work, you get paid, but you don't really get to see that reward at the end. You don't, even for us at the Ready Mix, or at least I haven't made a habit of that, going to the house that we poured the foundation of and saying, are you enjoying your house? Are you building a happy family here? But sometimes we do, but I don't think we get that enough, or at least can think about it, because I do realize that. And I try to stress that to our employees too, is even if you're doing something as simply as tailgating stone onto a driveway, that person's going to be able to come home to the family they love and be able to go back out again without hitting that pothole and being aggravated. I mean, just small things that, you don't necessarily get to see that end reward. And for us,
Sure.
Obviously in Ready Mix, it's every day that, you get to be a part of building this home and hopefully have this beautiful family in the home. And you don't get to see those things, but as a speaker and even with social media and writing my book, I get to hear a lot of that, of what the book meant to them. I've been getting text messages from people all over the country, of maybe even one that they gave a gift to their dad. I just had a friend that messaged me and said, the only bad part is that's all he talks about is the book. But it's a beautiful thing because he's going through some challenges. And he said, I can do this. Brock did. I can do what I got on my plate, and that's what's been the most rewarding of this whole process of getting this published is having people encouraged and motivated, and I hope everyone gets that out of it.
So I've got it in here, and looking at the front, I guess the cover of this, or the protective cover. Something you touch on in power of perseverance, mindset over matter, and actionable steps to overcoming objectives and unleashing your potential. Wow, those are definitely some big topics to conquer.
Yes.
And you did it in just a couple hundred pages. What was one of those, I guess, even to talk about mindset over matter, share with me one key point that you would, I guess, want to stress when it comes to mindset over matter.
Well, the one that stands out to me that I talk about in the book is eventually, not right when I started working with Mike, but maybe a month or 2 months after working out with Mike, he, he told me he didn't want me to bring the wheelchair in anymore, which I don't recommend that for anyone out there to do that. But I would come into to Schembeckler Hall, the football complex, and I would go all the way to the gym, and the doors would be open usually. But I had a parking spot effectively right outside of the weight room, and I learned to get out of my chair and I learned to crawl into the weight room. And then people eventually got used to it because pretty much everyone at that point said, "What in the world is going on here?" But anyways, I worked out that whole day like I always did, and then I crawled back out, and sometimes, and again, that wasn't initially. That was probably maybe 7 months of working out with Mike. I would put my arms around two of the football players, and they would help me walk out gingerly, taking steps to get back to the wheelchair eventually. But for, I don't know, at least a couple months, I was just crawling everywhere. But in any case, it really makes me, and it's something I talk about, obviously, but I didn't understand what that was other than a hazing process of making me do that. And like I said, I didn't understand why I would crawl to the next, like, that's not a rest. That's not a rest break crawling. Like, that was a workout, but it made me crawl the next workout, and then we'd start immediately. I didn't get a rest. And, but I think of that mind over matter. And in this case, I think of it as out of sight, out of mind, because after like a month of doing that, and I worked out 5 days a week at that time. I would be there every day and sometimes Saturday, but not usually. But anyways, when I crawled back out of the weight room, I would see my wheelchair in that parking spot right where I left it. And it was confusing to me. I'd be like, I'd like I had forgotten about it. And I remember having a meeting with my physical therapist and her telling me, "This is your wheelchair. This is part of you now." Like, almost like it was a prosthetic at that point, and I can't live without it. I need to take care of it and all those things. And at that moment in time, it was true, but I didn't want to accept the fact that this was just inevitable. Like, yeah, I need it. I realize that, and I need to take care of all those things. But anyways, that kind of flipped my mindset on it, because I'd leave the gym and I forgot, oh yeah, like I'm going to use that chair to get to my car. I'm going to use hand controls to drive myself home. Those are necessities right now. But it was really cool, because I don't even know. I think he just laughs if I ask him about it. But I really do think he had me out of that chair for 8 hours of the day, and it totally changed my mindset to say, like, I need that, but I don't need it. Like, I can get by without it. Now, again, it's not something I recommend, because it was a lot harder to get around. I mean, I wouldn't crawl around outside, or go down the sidewalk that way. But again, it was just like taking that and flipping on its head and saying, I mean, if I can do that, I can certainly go give a speech at a school. And that was another thing Mike asked of me that filled me with a sense of pride, which is, like, he never asked anything of me. He just said that was his purpose, and he's doing what God wants him to do. But he said, don't hide or keep your gift from someone else that needs it. And that's where I think the whole speaking and doing this book, I think that is where that all came together, is, hey, this is, Mike sent me out on a mission now. Right. And so I want to do this. And it does. I hope people realize too, that this is not, I didn't just have this mindset. I mean, when I was in the accident, I didn't have it at all. I thought that was that for me. It was the end of life as I knew it. And it took a lot of time. It took a lot of crawling on the floor before I really believed, wow, I mean, I can make things different, but I have to change my habits. I have to take it one step at a time, and it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time, and it did for me too. And it wasn't always pleasant, to say the least. So,
sure, it wasn't. So your story it's inspired countless people, and you've talked about some of the things that you've gotten out of that. But I'm really curious, like, how does it feel to be the source of that hope and motivation for others? You talked about, I mean, I'm really like, I would think that would be, I mean, it's a grand thing you're doing for others, right? But how does that truly make you feel?
It is. It's very rewarding. I mean, I've found that I don't know if I found anything as rewarding as that feeling and being able to be a part of that, but it's a big responsibility. I oftentimes say it's this blessing and this curse where you hear some very tragic stories, some difficult stories, a lot of pain and anguish and things that you don't want to see happen to anyone, and they share that, which I think is a pretty intimate thing. So I feel pretty blessed. Really, I feel that blessing side of it because they're sharing these things with you that are very personal, and even if they don't know me, and I've just spoken, I've shared something personal with them, and now they're sharing something personal with me. But I do really feel the blessing of that, and to be a part of that process, knowing, again, not that they know what I feel, but they certainly have a good idea of that crushing feeling or that painful memory that's laying there. They can relate on that level. And if I can ease some of that, knowing the feelings I felt at one time and the people that helped me get through it, then it's just it's a very powerful thing. And again, something that I hope that other people get to experience that, but you don't without taking some pretty inherent risks of being vulnerable, of sharing something that
Right.
this was really hard for me. I cried because of this happening. They're vulnerable moments, but again, well worth the reward. And usually when I'm in those situations of having to speak in front of a group and having to open up or having to even approach someone to start a conversation, that's usually where I draw my courage from is from the feedback I've gotten from other people. And certainly from Mike Barwis telling me to get up and do one more step or one more of this, like those were the difficult things versus really connecting with people. And that's just been, I guess, I would say extremely rewarding and an irreplaceable feeling to be that person for someone else that helps them through something or helps them see more clearly their purpose in life.
So as you're speaking with all these individuals over the years, can you recall one memorable encounter that just stuck with you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch. I'm trying to think. I have several. I have several that are in the book, but I'm trying to think back maybe to one that I wasn't able to share in the book. But I will say I know. Yeah,
No, that's okay. I know it's putting it on the spot a little bit, but I didn't know if there was just one in particular, and without knowing exactly which stories are told in the book yet. I
will share one, and it actually is in the book, so I'll leave a little bit, I guess, just to taste of it. But I did have a kid that I spoke to, and it wasn't for a time after, which I guess I'll leave that into the book too. But he actually, and I've had this happen several times, but he actually, the waitress brought me a napkin with a note saying, "I'd like to buy your dinner," and you spoke to me, and I really appreciated it. And so I want to buy your dinner, which of course I don't, I think he was probably 12 or 13 at the time. And I was like, I don't need to have him pay my dinner. But I've also learned that was a powerful lesson for me because I've learned to accept that. I mean, having someone hold the door open for me. I've had friends that sometimes might take offense to that because I can do it myself, which I get that too. But I've learned to accept those things because I think that's important for people that they have again, gratitude. I was able to help this guy, open the door. Like, hey, I appreciate it. Which a lot of the times I just take it as an honor. I mean, I feel like at times I feel like I'm a king. Like they roll out the red carpet, open the doors, all those things. And hey, that's great. If they, want to help me, that's I think very good for them, I guess, to want to do that for me. So in this case, he wanted to buy my dinner, and I thought that was nice. But I was able to meet his mom, who was she came over after dinner and she couldn't talk. She just was crying. And I remember feeling real emotional about it. And she explained to me what my speech did for her son and how she found out about it. And I'll just say, I talk about it in the book, but I mean, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And I can't replace those moments with anything really. And to get that, and I remember the day that I spoke, which that would have been back probably in 2013, I believe.
Okay.
And there was probably 1,000 kids that ended up in Founders Hall in Archbold. And I'm pretty sure we got over the total number of allowable participants because schools knew I was speaking and they knew my story, but they wanted to bring their kids in. And so I think they brought extra classes from like one kid plus or minus one grade. But the place was full and I was just terrified to speak. And I just remember after this kid had bought my dinner, I remember leaving and kind of reflecting, again, taking that moment to, stop and smell the roses, so to speak. But I just thought, wow, like I remembered back and I'm like, I was terrified to speak to a group of kids. And I realized it's actually more intimidating speaking to like junior high, younger kids than it is like high schoolers or adults even, to keep their attention and everything.
And that, is that why? Because of the attention aspect? I mean, you find this more terrifying?
I think partially. I mean, you always come up with these worries that never happen in your head. The teacher's like, you have created chaos. We gave these kids in your, stead, and you've let them go wild because you didn't keep their attention. But no, I've been really blessed, like, because I've had teachers all the time say, how did you get them to be so quiet? And it's like, I don't know, stage presence. I don't know. I like to have some confidence, but I remember being terrified of that. And I just felt so ashamed, I guess I would say. Like, I almost didn't I had to, I signed up for it, but I could have said no earlier. And I don't want to, that seems like a lot. But when I walked in and saw how many, I was like, oh, I didn't know there's going to be this many kids. The other challenge with the attention is Founders Hall is a big place and I'm up front on the podium. And I mean, they're way back there. So it's so hard to like reach out and actually, get that attention of those kids in the back corner. And the place was completely full. But I thought, how awful. Like, I almost didn't do that. And I would have, just robbed this kid of so many great moments because I encouraged him and he got better grades and had a lot of, his mom told me some of the things he went out to do. And I was like, I could have robbed him of those moments just because I was kind of scared of having to get up in front of the crowd. And I'm like, I'm never going to do that again. Now I've been scared to get up, but I'm never like even considering not taking on an opportunity like that just because I am nervous because I don't want to. And again, that's what I encourage people in the book is it's like, you don't even know what you're going to miss out on if you mail it in or call in sick or don't give it your all a particular day. Not that you'll be punished, but you might miss out on these great opportunities. I mean, you never know. And so I think that's something I try to encourage. And that's something, especially speaking to high schools and middle schools, is you have no idea the opportunities you have to try things and to fail and to smile and to fail. You don't have to, worry about, I think there's such a stigma on failure. Like, oh, if you do this, you have to be, straight A and all this. But in schools, when you take those chances, you grow up and you don't, you're less, or you're more risk averse when you grow up. And so it's like, try those things, find out what you're passionate about, what you love to do. But even as an adult, it's something that I try to take on every day. And as I said, make the most of, but that's the thing. I never would want to rob a kid of those moments, and by not going up there and hopefully sharing the courage and confidence that I was, passed on to when I needed it most.
Yeah. And those things we talk about, perseverance and mindset, now, how does that stuff all translate over into your leadership style in your business?
I mean, I'm a big purveyor of servant leadership and the fact that I, again, growing up, I did all the jobs. And I think we have a lot younger group here now, but I think those stories and even some of the myths of the past, they still are passed on through employees, which, creating that culture. but I think our employees, it's like fewer and fewer that remember me when I was yay big. They always remind me, I was just yay big. But I think that's really helped me a lot because I didn't just show up and, I'm the boss now. I've done all those jobs. I drove the trucks. I've fixed the trucks. When I got back from my accident, I had a lot of employees say, "Hey, my truck has really needed greased." And I remember my grandpa Tom telling me that now, when you work on a truck, you need to chock the wheels. You got to take the keys out, and then you can climb under the truck. Let someone know you're under the truck. And I said, I know all the safety protocols, but I said, I don't think it'll be necessary. And he said, well, you never know, which he's right, because, I still have found ways to run equipment if I want to run equipment, which most of the days that I'm in the office, I kind of wish I was doing that job. But like I said, I feel like I'm a big proponent of servant leadership. And I think that's a big part of what I do, is making sure everyone has the things they need to do the job that needs done, and making sure that our customers are happy and people are happy. And a lot of the times it's not always the case, but we try to do the best we can. And that's been a real challenge with writing the book. And I think having the book out now, I think people realize, oh, that's why he's been, present less here at the office and running around everywhere, is trying to get this finished. And so I think they respect that. But I've just, it's been awesome to be a part of the community, and being still a family run business is being able to do the things that are important, and the things that were important to me. Even when I was in school, you get these scholarships and you think, oh, cool, I got a scholarship of free money. And that's not really how it works. I mean, sometimes, but somebody's paying for it, right. Taxpayers or businesses. And again, growing up, you just don't realize that. You think those things are just out there floating around in the cloud. And in reality, no, there's somebody that hopefully they had that kind of help, and they want to pay it forward and do those things. Yeah. And have great looking schools, or the baseball fields, whatever it is. I love those things. And again, that goes back to hopefully having kids appreciate the opportunities they have, but recognize the opportunity they have in our communities, because it isn't that way. I mean, I've spoken at schools all over and seen some amazing ones, and seen some that have really struggled to offer those opportunities. And of course, I feel a big pull towards those places, and hopefully convincing even those kids that there's just opportunity in all places. No, again, unleashing your potential against all odds, because you never know what moment it can bring if you're just ready for it, and you're preparing for the optimistic viewpoint of what could be.
Everything let's step back a second. So, and you would like to think that by doing those things, giving back, that you hope those young ones eventually at some point in their life are able to do the same, and will see that in return give back to the community, such as the things that they received, right? And pay it forward, you mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, that we can all hope that. And we talked about just, what could we do to give back and make the place just a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
So how do you push yourself with everything you've done to date? How do you continue to push yourself beyond that 1%?
It's challenging for sure. And I tell people all the time, I think that's one of the guys that I really follow is Zig Ziglar.
Yeah.
He says optimism is like bathing. I recommend it daily. Like it's not just like, I mean, in a sense, you do create those habits, and you get up and you're like, all right, let's get after this. Let's do those things. And it can become somewhat easier, but it's not, oh, well, this person's just that way. Like, I'm not a morning person. That person just likes coffee and they're this person. But in any case, it is a constant effort of pushing myself, which in a lot of ways, I feel like I do a lot of driving. And so in that way, I guess I get my bath, so to speak, with podcasts and even with music that, listen, the kind of music you listen to. I know there's all kinds of crazy studies on that, but the kind of music that you listen to and the people you surround yourself with, I've found that That's another quote I love, that we're, I guess, given the opportunity to choose who influences us. I'm paraphrasing that one, but a lot of times we don't, just because we're in the moment and we're being influenced all the time. But again, you take a step back and say, well, like who is influencing me right now? And usually it is the people around you. Now you can control some of that, but a main part of it is who's around you. Now you can't control who's around you all the time, but you can be aware of it. But anyways, it allows us, we're allowed that opportunity to, put up our defenses, to not be influenced, or to open up and be influenced. And I think that is a big role in keeping yourself motivated and striving for being the best. And that doesn't always mean, I know a lot of people talk about that as surrounding yourself with better people so that you level up, but I don't think that's always the case. I think we're able to, again, help people that maybe they don't have quite the same talent you do in a specific area. And that's what propels you, because if you can teach it, then you're going to learn it better than if you just try to learn it. I think that's something that's important too. But for me, a lot of books I read. I mean, I try to read one a month, and sometimes I read fiction, but for the most part, it's leadership. Try to take those things in, and again, not that I memorize them, but I take it as food for thought, and then hopefully somewhere it gets out and gets applied.
Yeah.
But it's like working out. It's like you have to maintain that attitude and that ambition, because it is really so easy, especially now, to get comfortable. And it doesn't mean that's the thing. I'm extremely blessed. I'm happy with everything I have. I don't have crazy political ambitions or anything like that.
Oh, come on now, Brock. Wait a second. No race for governor or anything in the future, huh?
No, nothing like that in the near future. But I look out at that, and again, I feel like it goes back to what is rewarding to me. And just like with this book, it is rewarding to me to get the feedback on what it's meant to someone else. That has been vitally important to me. But in the same aspect of trying to achieve the best, I really do try to achieve the best for the employees as well. And I know that's a hard thing, as being a manager or someone in that position is you're making these decisions. And again, from the outside looking in, it's like, what are you thinking? Like, what's the and hopefully in trusting the process. And I think we've seen that where it comes to fruition, and just something as simple as going from paper to using a tablet and having less paperwork. It's confusing as heck on this tablet. And that was actually a pretty smooth transit. But again, going through it and hopefully having the respect and trust of employees that on the back side of it, they say, oh man, it's just easier than trying to get yelled at for where's those sheets of paper that you had the other day inside your big dirty truck that's wet all the time and greasy and all those things. And it's like, oh, here it is all crumpled up. Now with the tablet, much less to worry about, but it's a process of change. And that's something
change can be scary, right? I mean, we get in that comfort zone, right? And change can definitely be scary, but without change, we don't experience the growth.
Yeah. And ultimately for me, again, whether it's the employee or whether it's, a student in our community, I don't want to relax and become complacent, because it's really potentially robbing that person of their opportunity, which again, I've been blessed with so much that's been given to me, as far as really just giving me a chance. And that's all I really wanted is for someone to give me a chance and believe in me. And I mean, I was just overwhelmed by that support, but hopefully in gaining that 1% every day and reaching that potential every day, it's an abundance of opportunity for more people. And as you said when we started our conversation, I just don't think there's enough of that positivity around. And so if this podcast can be a small part of that abundance and positivity that I think is a very precious a resource that hopefully is one that everyone, it reaches everyone. So.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the drive time, and I find myself even more if I'm not listening to a podcast or something that I'm being mentally stimulated with, I get quickly, I don't want to say bored, but I just don't become engaged in the music. Sometimes it's nice just to escape in your thoughts, and do a lot of thinking to music. I typically don't know what the lyrics are saying. I might hear the beat of the music, but I'm usually instantly, I'm thinking about a million other things, right?
Yeah.
But then, when I start listening to podcasts, instantly I'm stimulated mentally and I'm trying to absorb that in. A lot of times I lose track of where I'm at driving, right? I mean, yes, I'm aware, but I'm like, oh, how'd I get here already, right? Because I'm so just, in-depth thought and consuming that, the podcast. And it was, as a leader, your journey is always learning. And if you're not learning, right, I feel you can't lead effectively, especially in the future. And it sounds like you're doing a great job at that. Not only that, but then you're taking that knowledge and then sharing that with others.
Absolutely. I do think that's true. I just, if you, that's something that scares me too, is again, I've been so blessed and have had just this abundance of success. And it's really easy to look back on that and say, especially people telling you, wow, I can't believe all the courage or strength you have. Yeah. Then you think to yourself, wow, I have all this strength and I know better. I mean, I look back and I realize, man, most of the time it's like I was running on fumes, but it's just enough. But again, it is something I'm aware of. I mean, I've been humbled again and again in my life. And so, I talk a lot about, humility, and humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And that's something that really motivates me. Even with the book, I had a guy from the publisher that works in marketing, Josiah, that told me, he said, don't think of it as, hey, look at me, look at my book. And I'm like, I hate that, and he said, don't think of it as that. Think of it as the kid that you spoke to and what it did for him. And if you don't get this book in that other person's hands, it's not going to do that for them. So you got to get the book in their hands. And I said, well, that makes it easier to promote it. You got to think of it as that, that end reward and how you're going to be helping or potentially helping that person avoid the many pitfalls of life that we can easily fall into, of feeling sorry for ourselves, of feeling hopeless. If those things, you avoid those things and get them to a place of actually being motivated towards whatever their purpose is, not my purpose, but what their purpose in life is, what their talents are, then you will have succeeded in that.
Well, and you mentioned, it's not about, look at me, look at my book, look at my book. No, I mean, this podcast, for example, it's not, look at me, look at my podcast, look at me, I'm on camera. Yeah. Do you think I enjoy being on camera? That's not something that I'm like, oh, look at me. No, but it's the passion of wanting to give back. Yes. Right? That's what drives me. And just saying we're driving this and going promoting this. You're driven to promote this book because you're passionate that this is going to help someone. This can help someone, right? Get in their hands.
And I'm sure that is very similar because I think people do this wasn't obviously an overnight just print it out and here's my book, but the same way with a podcast. I mean, it's easy enough to have a camera, but to really put together a podcast and keep consistent is not some walk in the park. Like, I do this for fun. I mean, it's having passion in it to really get you. And that's what I always say too, with people finding your passion. If it's worth it to you, you will go through the work and that whole to get to that next level. And it's not an easy thing, but
no, there's pains along the way. Right. I mean, but we continue to push forward.
Yeah.
And so as we get close to wrapping this up, I would like to ask, what message do you have for people that might be out there struggling in a difficult situation?
Yeah, there's a lot I would give. I mean, I do think number one is to be able to lean on, to know who the people are that you can lean on, but to lean on those people. As I said earlier, I do feel like that's kind of a forgotten piece of human nature, maybe. But people, it's not like they like to be asked like, hey, can you help do this or help do that? Or do you want to round up to the nearest dollar all the time? But I do think that generally people do want to be of help and service. And so to genuinely ask someone for help in, finding a job or finding, a better job, whatever that, or finding, is there any programs available? I mean, we get it all the time that there's programs right now to put you through CDL training to learn how to drive a truck. There's opportunity there, but asking people, for those opportunities. And sometimes you don't even know what you might need the help with, but I need help figuring out what I'm doing with my life or something like that, but to find those people and lean on them and ask those questions, I think that's an important thing. And especially if you're going through it right now, is to reach out to people. Don't say no for people. Like, they don't want to help. They're busy enough. They don't want to bother with me. Like, don't say no for them. And it doesn't mean you just flat out call and ask, but make that connection and reach out for that help. But aside from that, I would also say it's a slow process. And as we talked about, you're going to face resistance. You're going to have, challenges that come up and make you question, is this the right thing to do? When you start, you should set that up and say, I do need to, whether it's a change in a job or whether it's just a change in your habits. Like, if you're convinced that's the way to go, don't quit based on that resistance, because it will happen. If you're making progress, then you're going to be facing resistance in that progress. So I would just encourage them in that, and just to know, as I said before, that I wasn't just set up, like, oh, it must be nice to have a book. Well, no, it wasn't really nice putting the book together or even going through the stories to get to that place. It
must be nice to be able to walk, Brock. Just happened overnight, right?
I take that from my, but in all honesty, I do take it from my friends a lot that I've met that have gotten injured, and they always tell me how much, like, they would give just to have that moment of standing. And I'm usually out here sweating. If you see me anywhere walking around, I'm probably just sweating through my shirt. But every day I remind myself that there's thousands of people out there that would give anything just for the moment to sweat and to work. Because in some ways it was easier getting around with a chair or carrying things, but and then it was more but there's a lot of ways it was more difficult in the chair too, but vice versa. There's pros and cons everywhere. But I would encourage people, and to realize that, people are struggling, they have challenges, and that doesn't mean yours is any less or more, but they can be overcome. Like, someone has overcome what that situation you're in. It's just, you have to find that person. Or in my case, Mike Barwas hadn't been injured, but he was willing to bear the burden with me and go through it with me, even though he knew it was a miserable situation. He still was willing to be there and lift me up through it and be there with me. And that sometimes is the help maybe all the help you need, is at least to just have somebody to vent those things to, and be able to empower you to believe that you're going to overcome that situation. That sometimes is the only help you need. But I would just encourage them, to reach out to those people, and for anyone else too, if you're not going through it right now, I would encourage them to, again, maybe be a mentor to that person, because I think people are very good at a lot of times hiding those challenges they may face, but just to be open to reaching out to people. And again, I think that's something Mike saw in me, obviously, is that he didn't necessarily knew the future, but he knew something special was going to happen. And now he has a nonprofit, and he helps all kinds of people with all kinds of different injuries and ailments overcome paralysis. And he wouldn't have had that if I hadn't taken that chance with him.
Yeah.
But that's the same, in the same token, when you have that kind of attitude like Mike, where he's asking me a favor, like, let me be a part of this terrible situation. I want to help. And he, to this day, he feels like he owes me, but I feel like the other way around. But if you can find those moments, I mean, honestly, I think for anyone out there listening that, we get in the busyness of it. Like, if you just set up a time that works for you, like for us, winter's kind of our slow time. So I'll probably get out and hopefully do more speaking when winter rolls around and slows down. But for you, if it's like, hey, in the fall, we're going to have a little bit of downtime, slow time, like if you can just pick one of those, not that it's a certain person, but maybe something that's close to your heart, whether it's going uptown here to help out with the homeless shelter, or if it's something important to you is education, and there's some way you can help with a scholarship or volunteering at the fair. Make time for those things, because you don't know when that moment's going to come that you have a heart of, hey, I'm going to go help. And then instead, that's what I've always found is I go and speak to a group and say, hey, I want to help these people. I'm going to go speak. And then I realize, I learned more. I gained more than, hopefully they gained as much as me, but I gained so much from the experience that I'm like, I hope I was able to give back as much as I gained, because I went there to help them, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And those kinds of surprises I feel like are the best ones.
So even if it's not, you talked about giving, if it's not financially, and you don't have the financial means, it's just, your time, investing your time, giving your time to help out to a cause or something in the community, what's in giving back, trying to provide just a little bit to make things slightly better than what they were. It's important. And I think as a society, I think we see less and less of that. We see that as we look at different events and things in the area, less people volunteer, less people contribute. And then things kind of, in a sense, die off, right? Organizations tend to die off, and they no longer have a chapter of this or a chapter of that, or those people don't meet anymore. And we see that impact on the communities. Yeah.
And I think it's needed more than ever. And again, just that positivity and those small things. I don't need people to open the door, but those are small moments that matter, as those little acts of kindness that if we can be the one that gives those, then great. You're spreading that, and it's vitally important.
And it can be something as simple as a smile and saying hi.
Right.
It can make a huge difference in someone's day, right? Like you just don't know where that person might be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Brock, Beyond 1%, available on Amazon, correct?
Yeah.
And how else do we follow along in your journey moving forward? Social medias, website, what do you got?
Yeah, my website's brockmealer.com, and that's Meal is an MEALER. And I also am under the same name on Facebook, Brock.Mealer, Instagram @BrockMealer.
Okay.
I've been posting more on there, but like I said, hopefully that's a good positive shares that if you follow me on there, that you can check it out and follow me on there. And that's what I'm hoping is for people to read the book and unleash their potential and go beyond the 1% that a lot of us are given in different aspects of life. And hopefully they can achieve more than that.
Certainly. Love it. Love it. Hey, I'll make sure we post everything in the show notes as far as all those links so people can get to them. And Brock, thank you. Thank you for being an inspiration. Thank you for taking the time to share your story.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast and hopefully spread this message of empowerment and elevation. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Brock. Hi, I'm Mark Thomas, founder and CEO of Current Tech Solutions and Cyber Guardians. If you or someone you know could benefit from our cutting-edge IT and cybersecurity services, we'd love to help. Our expertise in securing your business with AI precision ensures that you're protected and empowered to thrive. Reach out to us today and learn how we can secure and elevate your business.